Thank you. And this is, I asked GPT-4 to show me Irish culture, what Irish culture is all about. Yeah. And that's what came out.
Oh, one had loads of fingers. Do you ever see that AI image where it's like 15 fingers? This actually looks like a cottage. So obviously there's going to be loads of questions on this. So can I bring to the stage Linda, John Clancy from Galvia, and Tomás Síocháin, sorry Tomás, from Údarás the Gaeltachta.
That was so cool. It's so amazing. What I want to know is I saw you ask ChatGPT what you should pack to go to Galway, and it covered all the bases. It said sunscreen and rain gear. Did you listen?
Well, thankfully I was smart enough to also look at the weather forecast because I haven't had any rain. I didn't use a precious suitcase space on all of my rain gear, but yeah.
We're going to get more into this, but I want everyone to get to know the other panelists.
Good morning or good afternoon. I'm John Clancy. I'm the CEO of Galvia. We are a machine learning company based here in Galway. We've a platform that helps our clients drive growth from their data, and we make it accessible. We kind of transform it into a way where they can get deeper insights for both the higher education space and for enterprise.
Tomás Síocháin is my name. So I'm pre-vice member CEO of Údarás. So Údarás is a state agency which has effectively three main areas of activity. One is in terms of enterprise supports, similar to Enterprise Ireland and the IDA, particularly around community development. On the other side, but crucially, and the overriding role is around the preservation of Irish as a spoken language in the communities. So you can see immediately where both the opportunities and indeed the pitfalls that we need to be aware of exist in this conversation.
Linda.
Oh, yes. I am the CEO of mideind.
Yeah. I want to know a little bit more about your company, in the sense that your project was born because of this partnership with OpenAI, or you existed before?
Yeah, so we've existed since 2015, actually. And a large part of what we were doing before 2022, let's say, was that the government of Iceland had a huge language technology program, which was government sponsored, and the goal of it was to make us more ready for this digital age, to build all kinds of infrastructure and language technology in Iceland that didn't exist before. And mideind was the biggest private entity that participated in this language technology program. And then that ended in 2022, and ever since we've become sort of more product focused. So we're trying to build on the infrastructure that we have now in the country. But we are also very interested in the revolution of generative AI. So we are working on several projects. We are building our own LLMs. We are working with entities like OpenAI, and just doing outreach, really. We are talking to as many parties as we can out in the world who are doing anything with us and trying to get them interested in Icelandic, but also trying to help other minority language community their journey.
It's very inspiring, and we know that endangered languages quite need this. But you've made a choice here, and you decided to do a partnership with OpenAI way before maybe anyone was maybe thinking about this. And I'd like to better understand what this partnership looks like from a relationship point of view, financial point of view. What are sort of the outcomes that you were expecting? Are you selling this, or are you financed by the government of Iceland? Just better understand that part.
Yeah, so maybe to first explain how this came about at the conclusion. So when this government language technology program was finishing up in 2022, the president of Iceland decided to lead a delegation of some stakeholders from the language technology community in Iceland to the US. And the goal was to talk to many different tech companies there and kind of give them data. Like, we had spent all of these years developing all of this infrastructure, and now it was time to go to your Microsofts and Googles and whatever and tell them, here you go. Like, here's lots of quality Icelandic data. Icelandic isn't well represented in your solutions. Are you ready? Are you willing to do something about it if we give you the tools? And the founder of mideind actually suggested that OpenAI be one of the companies that were visited. At the time, they weren't very well known. So DALL-E, the text generation model, had come out, but it was still several months until ChatGPT came on the scene. And so Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, was probably very impressed that a head of state wanted to come and meet with him. So he met with the delegation. And then we just picked up the thread. It was a good conversation. They showed us a lot of things that they were doing. And then, you know, people at my company took it upon themselves to contact them afterwards and be like, hey, like, is there any sort of partnership that we can have here? And it's very informal. We don't have any sort of a contract. It's not exclusive work or anything like that. It's really, you know, we get access to all kinds of things. And, you know, full disclosure, I mean, we use these models for free and, you know, for whatever we're doing. But, you know, we also give them a lot of data. We spend a lot of time developing all kinds of things. And, you know, we see this as beneficial because, you know, we've been able to nudge them on, for example, the tokenization issue that I talked about, where these models are just inherently not very fair to languages that are not English. And, you know, we have a path, like we wrote them a report. We said, see, like, this is a problem. Are you going to do anything about it? And I think they are going to do something about it. So it's, and we've seen this result in actual better results for Icelandic, which is good for us. I mean, we are taking this and we are building products on top of it and getting it out to Icelandic users. But of course, I mean, we're also competing with ourselves, really, because there are other companies in Iceland who are also benefiting from this and are building their own solutions that are competing with ours. But I mean, we just see this as our kind of social responsibility. If we are not going to fight for our language and do whatever it takes, then, you know, maybe nobody else is going to do it. And the government is not really involved in terms of they're not supporting this work in any way. Yeah.
Very often endangered languages, minority languages, if you don't have your own country, it's much more complicated. Luckily, Iceland does and Ireland does as well. Tomás, your organization has been at the forefront of this, trying to preserve the Irish language for a very long time. The digital divide is not new. It's worse for certain languages. I'd just like to understand your focus right now with AI. How much of a priority is this, or are you still tackling the digital divide for Irish language?
Well, it's a very significant priority. So what I might do is give you an analogy, I think, to kind of put this in context. If you look at the, many of you will be familiar with the Marvel Universe, episode 563B of any number of different Marvel movies, and which you kind of eat, enjoy, and then afterwards you're not really you kind of feel full, but you're not sure what you actually ate. It's that kind of, you know. So then, by contrast, over the last, let's say, year, many of those here in Ireland in particular will be familiar with a film called An Cailín Ciúin, which was made by an Irish company in Oscailge in the Irish language, and it was the first Irish language or movie nominated for an Oscar. So that became a huge focus of attention. So why is that important? And that why is telling that story in a different way of value? So for me, that's one of the immediate considerations to make. So there are other considerations. So firstly, if you take the traditional approach and build an economic business case around this, you would say there are 1.8 million people in Ireland who, in the sense that I say that they speak Irish. So that's an initial addressable market for anything like this. Not a big market, but it's a market. Internationally, to use, let's say, Duolingo, over 5 million people have engaged with Irish and Duolingo. So you get a kind of an economic sense. But that's fine. The far more important argument is if you look at the context of a young person growing up in the Gaeltachta or anyone around the country that goes to a Gael school, in viewing the world through the prism of their phone, which all young people do, and certainly I know the two people in my house do occasionally see me in the distance, but everything is on the phone. So that's a very significant challenge. So to take the example that Linda showed us of what ChatGPT sees the world, that presents the world in a very specific light. So from our point of view, number one, to avoid that digital divide, widening and deepening digital divide, it's actually really, really important for us, not only as a state agency, but what we're doing is effectively building a coalition, and Linda was very helpful to us this morning, and I see Nathan Alvik here from Trinity College, who also joined us this morning. building a coalition of those across the state in both public and private work to identify where the gap is and where the need is. Now, a lot of work has already been done over the last 10 years in terms of building the corpora, or the different data sets to use Irish in an online world. But at the rate of change in which ChatGPT, in which the different types of AI are developing and moving, we need to be really alive to this. The flip side is, and where the opportunity is in doing so, not only here in this country, is for the first time to actually address the challenge of providing services. So for many times, there's a huge concentration on, let's say, translation as an issue and making things available on websites, but it doesn't go to the heart of actually providing service in these languages. And Irish is an excellent example of that. Part of that then is when that digital divide extends, as Linda identified, it begins the death spiral. So the absence of a sufficient service or an equitable service, let's say Oscuaig or in a minority language, then leads users to opt for English, and it becomes a virtuous circle, so that you move further and further away from that being the language of use. To take the step forward, and rather than try and catch up, but to actually move ahead of where everybody else is, will not only allow us to establish a base from which we can begin to move our Irish back into domains that it hasn't been used in for some period of time, but also then working with others. And indeed, we would hope to share the lessons that we have learned and begin to look to the future.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like to take, definitely when we look at use cases for AI, there's a lot of use cases that are not very useful, but businesses are focusing on customer service, customer support, and they say that, hey, I do have an option in this endangered or minority language. That's huge for representation. John, I don't want to forget you here because we're the two guys with the beards here, but I want to hear about your founding story because you're probably super popular right now because you've got .ai at the end of your company and everybody wants to know what you do and maybe throw money at you. So I'd like to better understand how you got into this. What's your big focus on the business sense? Because we're talking about you probably have a different motivation on the day-to-day. So we really want to understand your founding story here and why you did this.
Yes. I set the company back up with my co-founder, my CTO, back in 2017. And back then we were in the world of conversational AI and natural language processing, trying to access information by asking questions, but in a more rudimentary way than you can now with the advance of Gen AI capability. And luckily enough, our first client was Nestle. So we learned very quickly around large corpuses of data and how to play in that space where governance, regulation is paramount above everything else. And we were bringing in a new technology. A lot of businesses in particular and organizations, they don't want another application on top of hundreds of other applications that they have to manage and open. So you have to kind of, put that experience either in Microsoft Teams, in a portal that they're already using, to be like AI plumbing as such. And then over the last few years, we started moving more into machine learning. We're a platform where you can deploy, like we firmly believe that your data is your data and models created out of that should be yours. And we deploy that on our platform and we continue to tune them and curate them for our clients. And, one recent example of this is we started moving into the digital marketing space. One of the largest digital agencies in London, they're all concerned that their business now, everyone is a graphic designer, everyone can create. And they see their business moving into the world of technology and becoming a tech-led organization. And one of their clients they own 8% of all brands on Earth. And we worked with them to create a large language model on their corpus of data. But they thought that's the end. Fantastic. That's where, here you are, here's your large language model. But then you have a whole new set of challenges with this new technology, is that they've got 14,000 people working in their marketing department. So yes, you have a large language model you can run queries over, but how do you extract intelligence out of it? So that's what they call the kind of greatness gap. How do you go from mediocre to great? How do you kind of level up a lot of your team? And that's where you can build an AI that will brief people and prompt them and alert them to say, have you thought of this? Maybe you should look at doing it like that. So you get there quicker.
Who's your ideal customer right now?
Our ideal customer, typically we operate in the higher education space for universities and also in the enterprise world. Any organization that has data that are looking to drive growth or profitability or accessibility for their team. And that's where the machine learning is more on. If you're a financial company, IT services company, machine learning loves numbers. So we would have over 3.5 billion euros worth of financial data under our management on our platform for the largest IT services company in the world. So we're predicting 3 months out, 6 months out, what's going to happen in their business. They manage 5,000 projects. It's an easy thing for AI to do, but very difficult for humans to do. So we've trained an ensemble of models, we would say, on their data.
Just to better understand, you're developing your own models, or you're using APIs?
No, it's our own technology. Now, we would lean into the likes of OpenAI for some querying and search it. Like for the University of Galway, they have an assistant, a virtual assistant called Cara, and we would use, well, for the query element of it, we would use some of OpenAI's APIs to make that experience better for the students. But the challenge here is not all those frameworks exist. And as Linda touched on, there's open source technology. There's Anthropic are really, really good. That Swedish company that you mentioned are excellent in the space. All those frameworks exist. It's the bit in the middle. It's the data challenge that nobody is really talking about. That is the real challenge. How do you get your data into a shape where machine learning can actually extract something of relevance for your business or for your organization?
What's your take here on this specific question for endangered languages? What if the university after today, next week, says, yeah, we like Tomás's idea. We want the option for AI, maybe a bot, to be able to help students in English, but also in Irish.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
Well, at present, we offer that, but it's not great, to be honest, because there hasn't been a lot of, I think there's one large language model around the Irish language, and the opportunity is to look at, there's loads of video, text. There is a large corpus of data there that can be put into a shape where there should be a large language model for the Irish language. So it will grow, and people will have the ability to continue. If you want to continue a conversation, Oscavia, you should have the power to do that.
Linda mentioned OpenAI's issue, which is not having enough data and using data that's not proprietary. New York Times is suing them. The debate, and I give the debate in Brittany around AI and around Breton language. Sometimes it's kind of scary, right? You have people that have dedicated their lives to protecting a language. They're not very familiar with tech and AI, and that's probably some of the times the reason why there is this digital divide, because they're not tech savvy already, and they're kind of blocking. Like, we don't, Linda, you'd be like from outer space for some of these people. But one of the things that's also a problem is, well, give us all your data. You know what? You've been recording someone in a village, 30 years ago, and you saved all this, and this is the right accent for this town and has the right grammar, and this is the right way to do that. They don't want to give that for free. That's a life's work. And a lot of that richness of the culture remains somewhere. What do we do with that? How do we reward the people that have created this? And Tomás, I'm looking at you here on this. Is this an issue for you as well, somehow?
No, sorry, I don't know if you want to go into that, Linda, but it is an issue. So I think the first instance is that this is not like creating a new set of software. It's actually, given the likely role that this will play in all of our lives, it actually goes far beyond that. So there are, as I mentioned earlier, opportunities around this. So it's the initial work that if you gather all those different data sets and all the work that's been done, people recorded with different conancy or different accents or stories, really capturing the story of a people all the way along. You're now opening it up through AI. If you use that as part of the data, it also gives you the opportunity to open that up in new ways. Again, going back to the issue about the ChatGPT model, if, as is likely, you're beginning to see that moving in terms of graphic design, in terms of image creation, and now, as we've seen with Sora, the early stages of some kind of moving images creation, if there is no broader base from which it's working, it's going to create a very generic output all the time. So it's, to broaden it to some degree, this isn't only an issue around, let's say, the way we live our lives and the languages we choose to use, but there are broader impacts around creativity and the very distinctiveness that makes us who we are and what makes us different in many different ways. But equally offers opportunity to bring other people to that and make it more accessible to them. So from my point of view, in addressing the digital divide, there is an opportunity for training and upskilling. and to change the narrative about what was seen, as you mentioned, the current digital divide where languages, and particularly languages that are lesser used, are not associated with technology. I mean, Linda pointed out that the dominance of English as the de facto model of design for all aspects of technology is a huge challenge. But within that, going back to my issue around storytelling, are huge opportunities about doing the same thing in a different way, doing it in an individual way, and doing it perhaps in a better way. And in doing so, offering opportunities to those that not only maybe have the training in some of these skills, but also have that additional benefit of telling that story in a different way through one or more different languages.
We rapidly touched on open source and closed. Meta released Llama 3 yesterday. Some announcement making it sound and look pretty good. Linda, your choice in working with OpenAI, obviously closed. Different philosophies between Meta and OpenAI, and maybe on the Microsoft side. The endangered language piece touches every single country in the world. You'll find, you mentioned 7,000 languages, and they're everywhere. Should endangered language folks and people that are working on this question maybe focus on open source models instead of the OpenAIs?
Yeah. First of all, we already tested Llama 3 and it's not particularly good in Icelandic. Since you mentioned it, I think that when it comes to your low resource and endangered languages, you should be doing whatever possible to get them at a seat at the table, as long as you're comfortable with it. So one thing about Icelandic community and sort of our attitude towards this, I mean, yes, OpenAI is for all intents and purposes, it's a for-profit company. Their technology is closed. And there are a lot of minority language communities who would not want to do what we are doing because, they have maybe a history in which they have really bad experience with, their resources being taken away from them and not having control over their own cultural heritage, even, their lands and so on and so forth. And we are lucky enough in Iceland that we don't have that traumatic history. And, Icelandic people like shiny new things and they like it when people pay attention, like in general, I'm generalizing, but, Icelanders like it when people pay attention to Iceland and our culture and language and whatever. So we are very positive about working with whoever is willing to do something for our language. So when we were working, trying out that reinforcement learning with OpenAI, we actually gathered a bunch of volunteers who donated their time to us and OpenAI to, come up with some prompts and evaluate them and so on and so forth. And that was pretty easy to get people to sign up because they just thought this was really cool. Like, wow, like we get to do this experiment. They haven't done this, they've done this for English. They haven't done this for another language. We're pioneering something and that's great. That said, we are also thinking about open source technology. And I mean, there are like tons of limits to, everything just, being in a closed model that we have very limited control over and we want more control. So I would always advise everybody to be looking in all of these directions and just trying to look for opportunities everywhere. And there are open source models coming up everywhere. There are a bunch of companies here in Europe that are developing these foundational models. There's a company in Finland called Silo.ai. They are their goal is to build a multilingual model that's good in all of the official EU languages. There's the Swedish company AI Sweden that I talked about. We ourselves are working on building a Germanic model with other companies mostly in Northern and Western Europe. So, I mean, do whatever works and what you're comfortable with is I think the answer there.
John, I'd love your take on this, on the open source closed.
Yeah, well, I think we would definitely be more on the open source side because, my and our opinion would be cost and transparency is going to revolutionize and explode in this market because as well as the compute power that you get from OpenAI, the cost of running some of these models is enormous. And there's the sustainability element of it. I think I read a very interesting article where every prompt on ChatGPT could power a 5 LED watt light bulb for 1 hour. So if you think about the environmental impact of what we're doing is colossal. And then there's the transparency of, how is OpenAI coming up with the answers? Everyone wants transparency in AI, and that digital trust is going to become bigger, I think, because everyone knows now if you're getting something for, an element of free, then you're the product. So you got to be very careful around your data, maybe how you license your data, how you control it, going into the future.
Charles, one last point which strikes me as interesting, that to take the converse view. So something that's been discussed almost initially in jest, and then actually as people can think about it a bit more, they kind of went, maybe that actually makes sense. So the absence of minority languages and the absence of the, let's say, OpenAI models able to access them, or any AI models able to access them, means that in effect that to some degree they can't be easily replicated. So as somebody said, as a thought experiment, you should ask the question, what role could minority languages play in terms of cybersecurity? Because they're more difficult to crack, because there is a limited, no matter how many times you trawl the internet, there's only so much you can find. So that's purely as a thought experiment, but maybe that merits a second session.
Well, in the US, we have this great example of the Navajo tribe during World War II, where the Germans could not understand American code because it was actually Native American Navajo language. And that the Americans were able to crack the German codes, but they never cracked Navajo. So we have something called the people that did that. They were the code talkers, and they're very much still honored today for the ones that are still with us. Tomás, I want to focus on something on a digital plan, because there is a digital plan for Irish in Ireland. You have this important agency, and I think your agency is an example possibly for other Celtic nations on what to do next. I'd like to understand maybe the year ahead and next year, what percentage of your budget that you're actually thinking about, hey, AI is going to be an important piece in this, and how is it entering this digital plan that you're presenting to the government?
So at the moment, the government have signed off on a digital plan over the last number of years, and like I mentioned, as Trinity have a huge amount of work done, as a TCU and indeed other universities across the state, in terms of developing some of the early stage, and particularly in terms of developing those data sets. So we have a really, really rich trove of data sets. Also, if you look at other sister agencies like Síocháin, who have catalogued their, you have text, voice, and vision. So there's a good platform to build on. So it's a question of where it's not the most immediate gap we can identify, but in terms of what's the first step we should take, how do we address the issue of ensuring that what we're beginning to build, actually, we can do so on an incremental basis? What's the first step we can do? So actually, as it happened, Linda was good enough to join us this morning as a part of a session to identify what's currently happening, because there's a huge amount of work that's currently being done in terms of pilots, with everything from Dublin City Council to ourselves looking at how we used AI within Údarás to improve our work stream, to all those different elements that if we can bring them together and identify where the gaps are. So we are nowhere near, I think, what did you were talking about a 1 billion mark as the first step that we need to get to for in terms of a data set. We're not quite there yet, but the key question is, how far along the road are we? And then to learn from the examples of Iceland after that. And then very much, not only in terms of a budget allocation, which, it's very much a priority for this year, and the budget will follow that. But equally, I would see this as a specific growth area into coming years. And the role of Údarás, from my point of view, that I see in terms of where this goes for us. At the outset of Síocháin, which is the Irish language channel here, probably 30 years ago, there was a 5 to 6 year period of upskilling where we went and worked with local communities to ensure that the graduate stream and the pipeline of people available to work in this industry is there. And that enabled that step forward in terms of where the next generation of people working in those creative industries came from. And I see this at a similar stage. This is a huge period of transition, of change, of development. But I think no matter what way this argument falls, the most important thing is to have a workforce that's in a position to take part in it and be active within it. And indeed, as well as trying to guide it from outside, that we can guide it from within, so that you have, those that have an understanding, not only Irish speakers, but a broader understanding of the culture and the language, from all the different countries. And I think that's the opportunity with this forum today, to look to the likes of Scotland, Wales, Brittany, all the other areas, and to form that coalition of shared interests. There are differences, and indeed that's what brings us together, but also similarities, and to work on those.
Yeah, I love that Linda's come here and share all this. This use case is definitely of huge value for actors like yourself. Should we be considering some sort of Celtic work group on AI to save the languages? Is this something that we should be thinking about? There, you mentioned Síocháin. They have the Celtic Media Film Festival, which has been going on for many years. Should we be thinking something on how to bridge that just digital divide, maybe not even AI?
Unquestionably, I mean, like even from this forum, I'd see that as a starting point. As I said, we're building that at a national level. We may have to tweak the name to ensure that we can include Iceland, but it is. I think there are elements, and I think Linda spoke to this earlier about it, of language groupings where actually, from a linguistic point of view, it makes sense. You know, that there are similarities in structure and in grammar, and that's the immediate starting point. But I think more broadly, a coalition of the willing is a huge step forward. And as they say, Oscar get too smart Latin hybrid, so good starters have to work.
There might be questions, and we're running out of time because this is a fascinating topic. Are there any questions? You're still thinking about them? John, I'd like to also, I mean, for the audience here, if they were a company and they wanted to possibly start using AI and work with you, how would they do that?
Well, look, the way I kind of frame this for most people is that forget about AI, Gen AI, machine learning, all the tools that are out there. Just have a look at your business and think, if I had 100 really eager interns that could come work for me, what would be the tasks I would put them at the start, and start making a list? And it's that level of routine, mundane work that's where you should start, because that's what AI is really, really good at. And then build it and develop it from there. Because some companies don't have enough data for AI to make a massive difference in their business. Some do. You definitely have to be of a size. But again, it goes back to the age-old question of, this is a data challenge, not a AI tools challenge. There's every open source. Anyone in this room can.
I'm going to challenge this one because 100 interns. Usually interns, when they show up, they're totally useless. They forget where their password the first day. Give me an idea. I'm coming to you. Okay, great. I want 100 interns. How long is it going to take to train this model, these 100 interns, where they're useful for me?
Well, the analogy is that if you need to think from a mindset point of view, I always go to the 1,000 or 100 interns to say, okay, they'll find problems. What are the problems I want them to fix? That'll take that amount of people. Then you take a step back and say, do I have the data to solve that problem? So can I get a company to come in and look at my data and start either predicting a future outcome or automating a workflow that is not necessarily in your life? Can it prompt me, alert me, make your team more productive? And typically that's what, most businesses are looking for. How do I make my team more productive? How are the right people doing the tasks they should be doing, that they enjoy doing, and they're not being tied up doing admin work, because nobody wants to be doing that. It's higher value work, and that's the value what AI can bring.
Great. It's a fascinating subject, but I think we got to cut it off. What do we have? A little break?
So we have a coffee break now. We have an exciting coffee break because we have Rab Fulton from Celtic Tales. He's a storyteller, and he's going to come on and do some stories for us now. But we also have some coffee, and then later on we have White Hag beer. So please stick around.
Woo!
Yay! So thanks very much, guys.
Thank you to the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really awesome. I'm so appreciative you were able to be on here. Thank you for making this happen.
Yeah, they all so
so
great questions.
they might have a billion questions to be honest with you sometime.